The coffee cup slipped from my hand and shattered on the linoleum floor just as Mrs. Bergman's voice erupted through the thin apartment walls. "Mr. Whitaker, your sprinklers are flooding my begonias again. Before we continue, please subscribe my channel for such more stories and let us know where you are listening in the comments." I sighed, crouching to gather the shards with a dish towel. 68 years old and still cleaning up messes, some mine, some not. The faulty sprinkler valve I'd installed last month had turned into a neighborhood punchline, and Vivian Bergman, God bless her scorched flowers, made sure I never forgot it. The phone rang. I ignored it at first, too focused on not slicing my fingers open. But the ringing persisted, cutting through the wall of complaints and the hiss of the kitchen faucet. On the fifth ring, I straightened and grabbed the handset. Arthur Whitaker speaking. "Mr. Whitaker, this is Amanda Monroe, from Monroe, Gilroy and Finch in Helena. I'm calling in regard to Evelyn Teresa Whitaker." That name, spoken in full like that, I hadn't heard it in nearly 16 years, not since our divorce finalized with cool signatures and colder silence. "What about her?" My voice felt like someone else's. "I'm very sorry to inform you. Mrs. Whitaker passed away on Tuesday evening. The service will be held Friday at 2 o'clock at Oakview Memorial. There will be a will reading at our office directly after." I leaned against the wall. The towel slipped from my hand into the coffee puddle. Tuesday, that was 3 days ago. While I'd been arguing with Vivian about water runoff, Evelyn had left the world, quietly, without warning. "I see," I said after a long pause. "How did you get my number?" "You were listed as an emergency contact. Also, you are named in the will. Your presence at the reading is requested." "Named in the will?" "Yes, sir." That seemed impossible. Evelyn and I hadn't spoken in over a decade. Since the divorce, she'd built an empire out of the nonprofit we started together, transforming it into a multi-million-dollar philanthropic conglomerate, something far larger than I ever imagined. While I settled into a modest retirement, she took the reins and never looked back. She had money, a lot of it, and she had our son Brandon, who had chosen her side without hesitation. What could she possibly have left me? "I'll be there," I said quietly. "Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. Again, I'm very sorry for your loss." When I hung up, I stood motionless for a while. The only sound was the rhythmic drip of coffee from the counter edge and Mrs. Bergman still muttering outside. I picked up the towel again, but this time I moved slowly, the kind of slow that comes when your world takes an unexpected turn. As I wiped the floor clean, a single thought echoed louder than all the rest. Why would Evelyn remember me? And what, after all these years, had she left behind? Friday arrived wrapped in gray clouds, the kind that made everything look like it had been painted in fading charcoal. I wore the same dark suit I'd saved for weddings and funerals, brushing a hand over the lapel where an old coffee stain still lingered faintly, a memory from a less dignified day. The drive to Oakview Memorial was quiet, save for the occasional groan of the aging steering column, and my own thoughts keeping pace beside me. Thoughts of Evelyn, of how we'd once been partners, not just in marriage but in vision, how we'd built something meaningful, until it was no longer enough. I parked toward the back and approached the chapel slowly. A small crowd was already gathered inside, figures in tailored suits and glossy heels, all with the kind of posture money tends to buy. I recognized a few: Evelyn's executive assistant, a board member or two, the new CEO of her foundation. No one looked at me twice. Maybe they didn't recognize me. Or maybe they didn't want to. I slipped into a pew near the rear, avoiding eye contact, folding my hands in my lap like a boy waiting for the principal. The service was brief, polished, professional, much like Evelyn herself had become over the years. A eulogy from a board member, a verse read by one of her charity ambassadors. Brandon, our son, didn't speak. He just sat at the front, jaw clenched, hand on his wife's knee. His face was the same as when he was 10, and caught lying about breaking the neighbor's window, tight-lipped, flushed, avoiding the truth. After the benediction, people began to trickle out toward their cars or toward catered finger foods I wanted no part of. I waited until the crowd thinned before heading to Monroe, Gilroy and Finch, a narrow stone building 2 blocks down, as stiff as its name suggested. The conference room was lined with dark bookshelves and a single long table. There were only 4 of us inside: Amanda Monroe, Brandon, his wife Jenna, and me. Amanda offered a polite smile. "Thank you for joining us. We'll begin shortly." Brandon didn't look at me. Jenna did, briefly, with a curl of the lip that barely passed for civility. When Amanda opened the folder, the air seemed to still. "This will is dated March 11th of this year," she said. "It is witnessed, notarized, and legally binding." Mrs. Whitaker made her intentions very clear. She cleared her throat and began. "I, Evelyn Teresa Whitaker, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." Her voice rolled on, precise and practiced, until the first allocation was read aloud. "To my son Brandon Elias Whitaker, I leave the following: the deed to the Aspen condo, the 1968 Shelby Mustang, and all remaining shares in Whitaker Green Foundation totaling $4.5 million. Brandon leaned back, visibly exhaling. Jenna smirked and squeezed his hand. Amanda continued, flipping the page. "To Jenna Whitaker, wife of my son, I leave my jewelry collection, valued at approximately $450,000, and a discretionary trust fund for future children, should there be any." Jenna's eyebrows lifted. That was clearly news to her. "And to Arthur Franklin Whitaker," Amanda said, looking up at me, "I leave the remaining contents of my personal estate, including all bank holdings, the primary Denver property, my unpublished memoirs, and the controlling interest in Whitaker Green Foundation, totaling $26.7 million. Silence. Brandon sat up straight. "Excuse me." Amanda didn't flinch. "You heard correctly. There's no way she meant that," he barked. "He hasn't spoken to her in years." Amanda's voice remained composed. "She updated the will this year. The documents are clear." Brandon's face twisted into something cruel. "That's a mistake. It has to be. She wouldn't give him everything." "She did," Amanda said, "and she signed every page of this document herself." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My ears buzzed, my chest felt tight, and every eye in the room was locked on me like I'd just pulled off a bank heist in plain sight. And then Amanda added, almost gently, "She also left a letter addressed to Mr. Whitaker, only to him." She handed me a sealed envelope. My name was written in Evelyn's unmistakable handwriting, sharp, elegant, confident. I took it with shaking hands, slid it into my jacket pocket without opening it. Brandon shot to his feet, knocking his chair backward. "This is outrageous. You'll hear from my attorney." Amanda calmly replied, "You're welcome to contest it, but I should warn you, Mrs. Whitaker had this notarized with 2 separate law firms and recorded a video message for legal protection." He stared at her, red-faced and speechless. Jenna tugged his sleeve. "Let's go," she whispered. They stormed out, heels clicking furiously across the polished floor. When the door shut, Amanda turned back to me and smiled softly. "She knew what she was doing, Mr. Whitaker." I nodded, still stunned. "Apparently, she did." I didn't drive home after the will reading. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind, it was anything but. Evelyn's name was still ringing in my ears, not from grief, not even from anger, but from sheer disbelief. That room, that lawyer, that moment, it had all hit like a punch I never saw coming. She left me $26 million, after years of silence, after years of Brandon telling me I was irrelevant. I drove without thinking, letting muscle memory guide me. I ended up at Carter's Grove, a quiet park Evelyn used to love when we still lived in Helena. The kind of place where parents read books on benches, and kids chased ducks through patches of overgrown grass. Familiar, peaceful. I parked under an old elm and sat on the bench near the fountain. That's when I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the envelope Amanda had given me. It was thick, cream paper. My name scrawled in Evelyn's unmistakable cursive across the front. Arthur. I hadn't seen her handwriting in over a decade, but it was still sharp, still confident. Just like her. I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to open it, not out of fear, but out of something deeper. The same reason you never revisit old letters or photo albums, because you know you'll feel something, and you're not sure if you're ready. But I owed it to her, so I opened it. "Arthur, if you're reading this, then the silence between us has ended, just not in the way either of us would have hoped. I don't know if this letter will bring you comfort or confusion, but I needed to leave you with more than just a check and a signature. I needed you to know why. I was angry for a long time, not because you hurt me, but because I didn't understand how you let me walk away so easily. I waited, foolishly, for you to stop me. You never did, but distance changes people, or maybe it just reveals them. I watched you, yes, from afar, live your life with humility, quiet dignity, no big gestures, no bitterness. And while Brandon kept score with every penny he thought he deserved, you stayed silent. And that silence said more than anything. You never chased money. That's why I'm giving you all of it. You were always the builder. I was the architect. We lost each other along the way, but the foundation, it was always yours. Don't let Brandon's anger make you bitter. Do something with this, Arthur. Something real. You were never forgotten. Evelyn. I read it twice, then a third time. The edges of the page trembled in my hand. She didn't ask for forgiveness, and maybe that was the part that made it feel most real. She just explained, not as a woman trying to right a wrong, but as someone finally speaking without pride or armor. She remembered who I was, and in her final act, she gave me back the voice I'd long surrendered, not out of love, out of trust. It didn't take long for the news to spread. By Saturday morning my phone had already buzzed more times than it had in months. Missed calls, texts, a few emails from people I hadn't spoken to in years, all with the same underlying tone, shock, curiosity, and veiled opportunism. But the call I expected most came just after noon. Brandon. I stared at the screen for a while before answering. Part of me hoped he'd cooled down. That maybe, just maybe, he'd call with something other than anger in his voice. I was wrong. How could you do this? He snapped before I even said hello. Hello, Brandon, I replied calmly. Don't act innocent. She was manipulated. That lawyer must have tricked her, or maybe you did. Did you threaten her? Blackmail her? I almost laughed at the absurdity. I hadn't spoken to your mother in years. You know that. Then why would she give you everything? That's a question you'll have to ask her, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She's dead, Dad. The line went quiet for a second after he said it, like even he realized the weight of it, but he didn't let the moment breathe. You don't deserve any of it, he continued. You weren't there. You didn't run the foundation. You didn't help her. No, I said quietly. I just built it with her. He scoffed. You walked away. You left us. And now what? You're rich. You think this makes up for everything. I never wanted this, I said truthfully. But she chose to leave it to me. That wasn't my doing. You're not keeping it, he said, the threat laced in every syllable. I'll fight it. We'll drag this through court until there's nothing left to give. I stayed quiet for a moment. Then you can try. Brandon's breath grew shallow through the phone. I could hear it. That same rage he used to hide behind when he was a teenager and didn't get his way. But this was different. He wasn't just angry now. He was afraid. Afraid of losing something he thought he was entitled to. She was supposed to leave that money to me, he muttered. It was mine. No, Brandon, I said. It was hers, and she gave it to the one person who never asked. He hung up. I sat there in the silence that followed, letting the tension settle around me like dust. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I didn't feel triumphant either. I just felt certain, for the first time in years. I wasn't at the mercy of someone else's expectations. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, or an apology. I had been written off, and now I was written in, not for revenge, for something much better. Control. By Monday morning, the quiet was gone. The lawyer's office called to schedule a formal transfer of Evelyn's assets, everything from the foundation's controlling interest to the deed of the Denver property. I was expected to sign off on several items in person. They offered to send a car. I declined. I didn't want luxury or fanfare. I just wanted clarity. I arrived at the firm in the same navy blazer I'd worn to the funeral, this time buttoned neatly, no stain in sight. Amanda greeted me with a warm smile and several thick folders stacked in a neat pile across the long oak table. You're now officially the primary shareholder of Whitaker Green Foundation, she said, sliding the documents toward me, along with full access to Evelyn's personal holdings, as outlined in the will, and no challenges. I asked, even though I knew the answer. None that have any merit, she said. Brandon reached out, threatened legal action. But after reviewing the documentation, including your ex-wife's video testimony, he's been advised not to pursue it. I nodded. I'm not surprised. Amanda gave a gentle smile. If I may, she trusted you. Completely. You should know that wasn't just evident in her assets, but in her words. She slid over a USB drive. Her recorded statement is on here. It's optional viewing, but I think she meant it as closure. I took it, unsure if I'd ever have the strength to watch it. After the paperwork, I asked if I could visit the foundation offices. It had been nearly 18 years since I last stepped foot inside the place we built together, back when we were still hosting community cleanup drives and handing out scholarships with handwritten envelopes. Back then, our office was in a converted 2-bedroom home on the east side of town. Now it took up 2 floors of a downtown skyscraper. When I entered the building, employees glanced at me curiously, a few whispering, some offering uncertain smiles. No one knew who I was, just a man in an old blazer, walking into the heart of a machine he once helped construct. The executive assistant met me at the elevator. "Mr. Whitaker, welcome, the board is expecting you." The boardroom had a view of the skyline, sleek chairs, a polished table, and a long screen showing the foundation's latest quarterly report. There were 6 board members seated when I entered. One stood. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, extending a hand, "I'm Robert Lang, current acting chair. We were sorry to hear about Evelyn. She spoke very highly of you, even when none of us had ever met you." I shook his hand. "Appreciate that. She and I had history." He gestured for me to sit. "We know the foundation is now under your direction. We're here to discuss how you'd like to proceed." I looked around the room. Professionals, suits, all probably twice as experienced in modern philanthropy as I was. But they didn't have what I had: memory, purpose, and a vision Evelyn once shared, back when none of this was about prestige or press releases. I cleared my throat. "Before we get into strategy, I want something understood. This place, this mission, it started with food pantries and scholarships for factory kids, not galas and speeches." Robert nodded slowly. "Understood. I'm not here to strip it down," I added. "But I am here to bring it back to its roots." For the first time someone smiled, not politely, but genuinely. I wasn't just an old man collecting a windfall. I was home again, and this time, I had the keys. The Denver property sat on a quiet, tree-lined street near Cherry Creek, the kind of neighborhood where hedges were trimmed like topiaries and porch lights flickered on in perfect unison at dusk. I hadn't been back there since the divorce. I didn't need to. It was Evelyn's world after that. She'd redecorated, repainted, reimagined every room until not a trace of me remained, or so I thought. The house was mine now, at least on paper, but in truth it still felt like hers. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of cedar and lavender. Everything was still, preserved, almost, like a living museum. Furniture sharp-edged and modern, paintings that meant little to me but probably cost a fortune. No clutter, no warmth. I moved from room to room, letting my fingers brush the walls, the mantel, the edge of a photo frame near the stairs. It was a picture of Brandon, taken maybe 5 years ago. He wore a stiff suit, standing beside Evelyn at some foundation banquet. His smile was wide, but his eyes, they looked elsewhere. I made my way to the upstairs study, Evelyn's sanctuary. A heavy oak desk dominated the space, surrounded by shelves of legal books and handwritten journals. On the far side sat a small safe, tucked discreetly behind a canvas print of a waterfall. I found the key taped beneath the desk drawer. Typical Evelyn, subtle but not impossible. The safe clicked open with a reluctant groan. Inside were 2 envelopes, both labeled in that familiar script. One read, "Foundation Records, Confidential," the other, "For Brandon, give only if earned." I held the second envelope for a long time. If earned, what had she meant by that? I turned it over, sealed, heavy. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I placed it gently back inside the safe and relocked it. Maybe one day Brandon would come around. Maybe he'd stop seeing himself as the victim and start acting like a man who understood legacy. But not today. Today, I wasn't here to hand out olive branches. I was here to take back space. Downstairs I brewed myself a fresh pot of coffee in her expensive kitchen, sat on the patio she once claimed was too cold for mornings, and watched the sun dip below the treetops. Birds chattered in the distance. A sprinkler system hissed quietly to life. Funny thing about silence. When you're young, it feels empty. When you're older, it feels earned. I took a sip, leaned back, and let the quiet settle in my chest like a long-held breath finally released. Evelyn had trusted me to carry the weight of what we built, and now, slowly, I was learning how to carry it with grace. A week after I signed the final asset transfer, Brandon showed up at my apartment, unannounced. I heard the knock before I saw the silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, pacing just beyond the frosted glass of my front door like a man who had rehearsed this moment too many times. I opened the door slowly. He didn't smile, just crossed his arms, eyes narrowed with something between hurt and defiance. "Nice place," he muttered, glancing around the modest entryway. "I make do," I replied, stepping aside. "You want to come in, or are you here to yell from the porch?" He entered, stiff as stone, and stood just inside the living room, like a stranger at an open house. His eyes darted from the bookshelf to the worn recliner to the simple table set for one. Nothing lavish, nothing new. "This is where you live?" he asked. "It is," he scoffed. "After all she gave you?" I didn't take the bait. I moved past him, and poured coffee into 2 mugs, setting one on the table. He didn't touch it. "I'm not here to make peace," he said finally. "I didn't think you were. I just want to understand. Why you? Why would she give it all to someone who wasn't even in her life for the last 15 years? I met his eyes. Maybe because I never asked her for anything. He shook his head. "You think I didn't work? You think I didn't earn my place?" "I think," I said slowly, "that Evelyn saw something in you she didn't trust." Brandon stepped back, his face darkening. "She didn't know what she was talking about. She knew you better than you think." There was silence between us for a long moment. Then he said something softer. "She wrote me letters, you know, after she got sick. Said she regretted some things. Said she hoped I'd grow into the kind of man who'd stop chasing her approval." I raised my eyebrows. "Have you?" He didn't answer. I reached into the small drawer beside the couch and pulled out a small key. "This opens a safe at the house. Inside is a sealed envelope with your name on it. I didn't open it. She left it for you, but told me to give it to you only if I believed you'd earned it." Brandon's jaw tightened. "So, have I?" "I don't know," I said, "but I do know this. If you open it expecting money or property, you've already failed the test." He stared at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something beneath the pride. Doubt, maybe even shame. I handed him the key. He took it without a word, turned toward the door, and paused before leaving. "She still loved you, didn't she?" I looked down at my hands. "We never stopped. We just didn't know how to say it." He left quietly, and I sat back in my chair, watching the mug of untouched coffee cool in the sunlight. Maybe one day he'd understand, or maybe he'd stay bitter. Either way, Evelyn had made her choice, and so had I. 3 days passed without a word from Brandon. I didn't expect a thank you. I didn't even expect an acknowledgement, but I did wonder if he'd opened the envelope, and if it had changed anything at all. The foundation board had already begun adjusting to the shift in leadership. I'd spent the better part of the week sitting with department heads, listening more than talking. I wasn't there to uproot their work. I was there to remind them what it once stood for. Grants were being restructured. Admin budgets trimmed. The gala circuit was paused. Community impact reports, real ones, not marketing gloss, were back on the table. Then on Thursday morning, Amanda called. "I wanted to discuss something we haven't addressed yet," she said. It was tucked in Evelyn's private estate files, something she called the legacy clause. The what? She drafted it last year. It's essentially a conditional amendment to the trust. She didn't want it in the main will. Said she wanted to give you room to decide. Decide what? Amanda paused. "It's about Brandon." I sat forward, heart suddenly heavy. She outlined that if, within 1 year of her passing, Brandon demonstrates measurable reform, not financial, but character-based, then you may choose to release a portion of the remaining estate into a separate trust for him, roughly $2 million. I let that sink in. "She left that decision entirely in your hands," Amanda continued. "She even wrote Arthur will know if he's ready." I was quiet for a long moment. "Is there a deadline?" 12 months from her date of death. "You don't have to decide now." After we hung up, I stared out my window for a long while, watching leaves stir in the breeze outside the foundation office. It felt strange, holding so much power in my hands, especially when for years I'd been made to feel like I had none. But Evelyn, she had trusted me with more than just money. She had trusted me with judgment. That afternoon, I visited the Denver property again. The key I gave Brandon had been used. I could tell. The safe had been opened, and the envelope was gone. In its place was something I hadn't expected. A note. "Dad." I read what she wrote. It wasn't money. It was worse. It was truth. I don't know if I'll ever deserve a second chance, but I've started therapy. I closed the Aspen condo and sold the car, donated the proceeds to the scholarship fund. I'm not writing this to ask for anything. Just, thanks for not giving up entirely. Brandon. I folded the note and sat down at the desk Evelyn once used to plan global outreach campaigns. My fingers brushed the smooth finish, and I could almost hear her voice again. Not the executive bark she used in interviews, but the soft tone she used when we'd dream aloud over coffee. Maybe there was hope yet, but I wasn't going to rush it. Let him grow. Let him prove it. Let time tell the truth. Evelyn always trusted it would, and if he did, then maybe, just maybe, that legacy clause would serve as more than just a legal fallback. It would be the first brick in rebuilding something long broken. The following weeks brought a strange kind of peace. Not the loud triumph of revenge, but a quieter, steadier sense of balance I hadn't felt in decades. I split my days between the Foundation's offices and the Denver property. I hadn't fully moved in yet, but I found myself drawn there more and more, sweeping off the porch, organizing the study, even pulling weeds from the rose beds Evelyn used to curse during spring. One morning, while sorting through her files, I found a series of handwritten thank you letters, dozens of them, all from scholarship recipients over the years. Some were written in childish scrawl, others typed on formal letterhead. They spoke of changed lives, second chances, and futures rebuilt, and almost everyone ended with the same sentiment: thank you for believing in someone no one else did. I sat on the study floor for a long time reading each one. The words blurred after a while, but their weight stayed with me. This was what Evelyn had nurtured. This was what she had left behind. Not wealth, not prestige, but real impact. And now that responsibility lived with me. That evening, I got another note, this time delivered by hand. I found it tucked beneath the welcome mat at my apartment. A simple white envelope, no address, just my name in careful block letters. Inside, a single sentence: would you have lunch with me, Brandon? No demand, no tone, just an ask. I didn't hesitate. I sent back a simple reply on a yellow sticky note. Tomorrow, 12:30, Henry's Diner. The next day we met at the booth by the window. He was already there when I arrived, a mug of coffee in hand, 2 menus sitting untouched. Thanks for coming, he said, standing as I approached. His face looked different, still guarded, but less brittle. We ordered sandwiches, talked about nothing at first: football, weather, the new bus system route, and then slowly, the conversation turned. I've been reading Mom's journals, he said, picking at his fries. She wasn't who I thought she was. No one ever is, I replied. Not completely. She loved you, he said, eyes flickering up to meet mine. She didn't always say it, but it's all over those pages. I nodded. I loved her too, even when I didn't understand her. He took a breath. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not here for the money. I believed him. For the first time I truly did. Then what are you here for? I asked. He shrugged, glanced out the window, then said, I want to help. With the foundation. With whatever you'll let me be a part of. I studied him. He wasn't the boy I raised, and maybe that was a good thing. Life had knocked him off the pedestal Evelyn unknowingly built for him, and now, standing on level ground, he was trying to rebuild. I'll think about it, I said honestly. That's fair. We finished our meal. No big breakthrough, no dramatic ending, just a quiet nod between father and son, and a bill we split without argument. Maybe we couldn't undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, we could learn how to move through what remained of the future, together. Spring rolled in quietly that year. No dramatic storms, no late freezes, just a gentle warming of the earth, as if life itself was ready to start over. I stood on the porch of the Denver house one morning, coffee in hand, watching sunlight pour over the hedges. The roses were blooming early, tiny buds just beginning to unfold. I thought of Evelyn, how she used to curse the aphids, but still tended the flowers like they were porcelain. She had always been like that, sharp around the edges, but soft where it counted most. Inside, the Foundation's quarterly report lay open on the dining table. For the first time in a long while, the numbers didn't feel like pressure. They felt like possibility. We'd shifted funds toward local programs, cut redundant salaries, and re-established partnerships with organizations we'd forgotten in the rush to expand. It was working, slowly, but surely, it was working. Brandon had come in once a week, never more, never less. He didn't ask for titles or favors. He sat in on meetings, took notes, and most importantly, he listened. Really listened. One day, after a meeting with the youth outreach team, he lingered in the hallway, unsure of himself. "Can I show you something?" he asked. He handed me a document, a proposal, a scholarship fund, targeted at single-parent students under the poverty line. The kind of kids Evelyn and I used to advocate for before the non-profit had become a polished brand. At the bottom, it read, "In memory of Evelyn Whitaker, builder of futures." I didn't say anything for a moment, just felt a tightness in my throat that I hadn't felt since the day I read her letter in the park. "She'd be proud," I said quietly. He nodded. "I hope so." That weekend, I opened the safe one last time. The envelope marked for Brandon was gone now, given. The file labeled Foundation Records, confidential, was being digitized by Amanda's team for historical archives. But there, beneath it all, was one final item I hadn't noticed before, a small black notebook, unmarked. Inside were Evelyn's handwritten thoughts, scattered over the last year of her life. Some were reflections, some were regrets, but one entry near the end stood out, a sentence underlined twice. "In the end, what matters isn't who has the power, it's who uses it to protect what's good." I closed the notebook and held it against my chest. She'd made her peace, and now, so had I.